Did Garrett Nussmeier or Cade Klubnik help their cases for the 2026 NFL Draft? Stay tuned as we break down their games this past Saturday. Ryan, we were given an opportunity to compare two of the top quarterbacks in the 2026 NFL Draft, Cade Klubnik of Clemson, Garrett Nussmeier of LSU, and we have some context for what will happen for this upcoming class based on how they performed. I got to be honest, to really throw us into this, Nuss looked much improved. I don't think that he is completely resolved all of his issues, and I don't think that he is a perfect prospect by any means. But I think that the start of this conversation immediately goes to how much more composed Garrett Nussmeier was.
Yeah. No, Joe, I think that this game was really interesting because I didn't think Nussmeier was great early in this game. Like, I thought that he was just, everything was short. Everything was just kind of, there just wasn't an intention to create explosives early in this game. So, I mean, like the yards per attempt in the first half were incredibly low. But the thing about Garrett Nussmeier, and I think we saw this in about the middle of the third quarter to the end of the football game, is that when he hits these stretches where he is in rhythm and he's confident, he has some of the more impressive throws in the 2026 NFL Draft and consistently, right? I mean, because they were losing what was it, like 14-7, or no, 10-7. What was the halftime score? LSU was losing though. I can't remember exactly what the score was.
It was 10-3. It was 10-3.
So it was 10-3, and Nussmeier came out in in the middle of the third quarter, and he just couldn't miss. Like, it felt like every throw was within a grasp, right? And it felt like every throw was in rhythm, and he was making some really nice bucket throws, like the throw to Berrien Brown that didn't count. But I mean, he was pinpoint accurate throughout the third quarter to the fourth quarter. And honestly, that's a big thing for me, because what was the problem with Garrett Nussmeier last year? When he would get off to a slow start or he'd have a turnover, and he didn't have a turnover this game, but like when he got off to a kind of a slower start, sometimes he would press and then he would make a lot of mistakes, and it would go downhill quickly, and he would just become kind of a turnover-oriented player. This game, despite getting off to a slow start, despite not leading at halftime and being down and having to come back against a talented defense in Clemson, Garrett Nussmeier came out and he showed resolve and he showed resilience, and he stood in there and he was able to play clean within the pocket, play clean within structure, get the ball out of his hands, and I thought that was a really good sign for Nussmeier, the fact that he showed that resiliency despite the first half not playing out probably how he wanted it to.
Right, so that's the biggest part for me with him as a draft prospect, and also what needed to happen for LSU to actually be a legitimate SEC champion threat this year was that he needed to be, as I said, more composed. He needed to not completely snowball multiple mistakes over and over. Last year, it was really hard to watch him because you'd see a really nice play and then it would get completely detracted by the fact that he made a silly, silly mistake. I saw a version of him that took a step back, almost looked like he took a breath, and he took what was given to him. He was connecting with his receivers with what was available. He wasn't trying to take shots in a game that was tight and close because he felt like he had to hit the big play to set up his team to succeed. That version of Cade Klubnik that version of Garrett Nussmeier to me, Ryan, is one that can get drafted in the first round. He's got the arm talent. He's not exactly the most athletic amongst those that have been brought up and discussed for this class. But if he could just be steady and keep the offense on schedule, that goes a very long way in projecting him as a draft prospect. I'm not going to completely overreact and jump to saying, oh, he's automatically a first rounder. Like, this is all I needed to see. This is one game. Right. But for him to step into a setting against a really good defense, a well-coached defense, to play that way and to come out with a solid completion percentage, didn't light the world on fire in terms of the yards he threw and the touchdowns that he threw, right, but to just be solid, to be accurate, to be reliable, those things I think go a long way for him building a really solid season.
So the deeper conversation, though, and I know we're not getting like too deep into this, right, is I think we agree, and correct me if I'm wrong if you disagree with this perspective, but for me, when Garrett Nussmeier was in the third to fourth quarter of that game, when he's that version of himself, that is maybe the highest floor quarterback in this class, right? Because it's a class of upside, right? Like we're talking about Lenore Sellers upside. We're talking about a couple other guys upside. Even Drew Aller, we're talking about the upside, what he potentially could be. But many of those guys don't have a great floor because you're like, he's a volatile prospect. He's a boomer bust type of player. Garrett Nussmeier, for me, if he's that version of himself, is the higher floor quarterback, which is why a team, I think, values him a ton. But the question still remains, though, Joe, where's the ceiling, right? Like, if we're talking about a kid that potentially goes in the first round or maybe even potentially in the top half of the first round, we still do need to talk about the ceiling. I know some people say ceilings are overrated. Well, not when you're drafting a kid in the top 15, because that's a player that probably needs to be an elevator on not a great football team at some point in his career, right? So I think that there still does need to be a conversation here because we're still talking about a kid that is sub 6'1", 205 pounds, give or take a couple pounds, north or south, 9-inch hands, not a great athlete. Like, he doesn't have the craziest tools of all time, so there still is an interesting conversation of floor versus ceiling with a Nussmeier.
I'm going to throw out a comp that I think is going to bother
Mac
you,
Jones.
but I'm going to do it anyways. No, well, okay, so I think that's the worst version of him is Mac Jones. This isn't like a direct comparison that this is who he is as a player. It's more so, can he be this in the NFL? I don't think it's out of range to say that he could be Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield's not a big, physically imposing quarterback, but he knows how to use his arm talent. He's got a much stronger arm than people give him credit for or expected him to for his physical profile. Again, for being as compact as he is, he can really drive the ball into tight areas. Both those guys fit that description. They're mobile when they need to be, but neither is a real threatening athlete as a runner. Like, where would you put Baker Mayfield if you ranked the quarterbacks in the NFL? I don't need an exact number, but he's in the top half, closer to the half, not in the top 10. Say 14th, 13th best quarterback. Yeah.
Top 12?
I think that's the ceiling for me with Garrett Nussmeier. And I think that's realistic and that's fair.
In the right situation, I agree, right? Like, I agree there because I think the floor is there. But again, Joe, like, so here's the interesting part about, like, draft capital, though. Are you drafting a quarterback in the top 10 if he's the number 12 quarterback in the NFL, potentially?
Yeah, actually, yes. It took me a second there to kind of like register that. But Ryan, look at how many teams toil with the inability to get a guy that's even in the top 25. I think that yes, if you have a really solid roster, here are two examples of teams that have really good rosters but have awful quarterback situations. The Colts and the Steelers. I think that they would be very happy with being able to throw Nussmeier in there with what you just said. If this is the version of him we get where he's the highest, maybe the highest floor quarterback in the class, you throw him in, he could be a early impact rookie or a second-year guy that helps the team get to the playoffs.
I accept the premise. I just hesitate on the lack of ceiling in the top 10 conversation. I do because I've just seen too many teams deal with quarterback purgatory. Like, that's been a thing, right? Where you're just like, that quarterback is not bad. He's actually in a vacuum a good player, but is he good enough to get you over the top, right? And like, again, I'm not trying to take that kid.
Purgatory's better than hell, though. Purgatory's better than hell, and
that's a fair point. It's a fair point.
Seriously, the hell that you deal with is watching Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson donk around in the preseason because you've got two guys with incredibly high ceilings that just can't put it together. I think that most fans would be happy with consistency.
But which team? So, all right, so you have a quarterback that's hell or you have a quarterback that's purgatory, right? A situation. Which of those teams is winning a Super Bowl? The answer is neither. So they're the same. They are the same.
I get that. Yeah. You have to take swings, but the problem is that there's a chance that some of these teams might not be picking in a position where they can take the swing on the super talented player. So I think it's a complicated conversation and one that we're going to have a lot throughout this season. Cade Klubnik is in this conversation. He was 19 of 38 for 230 yards, no touchdowns, and an interception. I have to say, I do not think that he played great, obviously, but I think that there has been a lot of criticism issued his way that is a little hyperbolic. It's the biggest thing that bugged me about week 1 is I think everybody says that every guy who didn't throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, that this guy sucked. If he had a messy day, he threw a pick, it automatically means the player is bad. I think that we need to recognize that he was in a really tough spot. They couldn't run the ball, and he threw the ball 38 times, and his best receiver went out of the game. There were some serious issues for this team as soon as Antonio Williams went down, and very clearly it is hurting them that they don't have a running back on this roster, that they moved a wide receiver to running back to mitigate that.
I think we're on the same page as far as like the first week takes, because you don't prove a point or prove a prior or disprove a prior based upon one game. Like, that's just not how the evaluation process works. And honestly, most NFL scouts are not going to watch the first game of the season. They might just see progression throughout the year, but like they're worried about what you looked at the end of the year. Like what was the last possible film that you put out there, right? So yeah, I think that we overemphasize a first game prior way too often. And I do think there's context. I do wonder, and I know some people are going to roll their eyes or whatever, but like I do wonder how different that game looks if he has Antonio Williams the entire fraction of that game, because he is the quick separator. He's the safety blanket. He's all of those things in the short to intermediate part of the field that's going to move the chains potentially for a Cade Klubnik. So that improves your game tremendously. And that's no disrespect to like Tyler Brown, who's playing in the slot a ton in this game after he got hurt. But again, Antonio Williams is a very important piece, and he makes TJ Moore better. He makes Bryant Wesco better. He makes everybody better ultimately. And yeah, I mean, they probably should have portaled for a running back, right? Like, they probably should have portaled for a running back. They should have done something in the. I don't, because like the Adam Randall kid is a former pretty highly rated wide receiver who hasn't done anything at wide receiver, so you move him to running back. They had the true freshman Gideon Davidson, who barely played in this full game, well, who's pretty talented. He'll probably be a good player in year 2, year 3 potentially, but like they just don't have a guy right now that is going to go into a huge football game and demand the attention of a defense. Like they're going to look at Cade Klubnik and say, I need to stop 2, not that I need to stop number 8 or whatever the hell number Gideon Davidson was wearing in his first game, right? So yeah, I think that all those contexts is considered in this conversation. And plus, the Clemson offensive line going into the year, I felt like we were hyping up that group, Joe, as far like for not you and me specifically, but from a national perspective of like that could be one of the better offensive lines in the country potentially. They laid a goose egg against LSU. So, yes, I don't think that Cade Klubnik played well. I think that Cade Klubnik still has a bad habit of breaking the pocket too often and not being comfortable inside of structure and trying to do a little bit too much at times and being a little bit of a gunslinger. But I do think that his skill position, his supporting cast did let him down in this football game. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's not going to be, when we get to the Clemson names to know, there's not going to be a long list of guys that we're going to be really hyping up, because they had a really difficult struggle of a game. To just round out the Klubnik thought, let's wait a little bit. If he plays like this the rest of the season, then yeah, we have got a problem with Cade Klubnik, and he's probably not going to be a first rounder. But I'm projecting that I believe he will bounce back. Let's talk about some
Joe,
of these LSU
can I say
guys.
One more thing? Can I say one more thing before we move on about Klubnik real quick? So I will say this is a perfect example of why some people in the NFL like Cade Klubnik a lot, and other people are more in the day 3 range on Cade Klubnik. There is peaks and valleys to him specifically, and I think we saw that potentially in this football game as well, which is why we need to kind of have a wait-and-see approach and have a little bit more of some data points.
To throw in, though, to move on here for LSU guys that stood out. One, got to throw in there that Aaron Anderson was incredibly dynamic. He was super, super explosive. Mansour DeLeone looks every part of the potential first-round defensive back that we were hoping that he could be. We also got some pretty flashy plays from Trades Green, the 6'7" basketball player. Although I think he had one play that got called back too that was pretty significant. But the 2 guys that my attention were really directed towards was Don McKinley, former 5-star defensive tackle, who only had 1 tackle but was a menace in the middle, taking up space. I am extremely enamored by Bernard Gooden. I don't really know what to really do with him as a draft prospect, because he's only listed at 6'1", around 270 pounds. He is undersized. but that kid has one of the fastest first steps that I have seen for a defensive tackle. That kid was using his leverage to get underneath offensive linemen. It was one of those players who, shout out to my co-host Blake Ruffino, he hypes up LSU guys a lot, and I kind of rolled my eyes as he was doing that after the game. And then I watched the film, and I'm like, holy shit, who's 88? And then I looked at the roster, and I looked, oh my God, it's Bernard Gooden, who played out of his mind. I don't know what to do with this kid because he's really small. He's got like the Kalijah Cansey build going on. But wow, I was really impressed with his performance.
Yeah, I mean, Joe, first and foremost, number 88 is an elite defensive tackle number. I don't care what anybody has to say about this conversation in the chats. South Florida transfer, I also don't know what to do with him. He's personally just like not my type, right? Like I occasionally don't mind the lack of thresholds. I mean, you know, I'm a Zane Durant fan in the 2026 class, but Zane Durant is still 290 pounds, right? We're not talking about 268 to 270 pounds. Like that is a weird threshold conversation to have. But he was flashing everywhere. I mean, he was killing the interior offensive line of Clemson, and I don't think that group's very good. So like he should kill it, but he was stronger at the point of attack than maybe you consider, and he moves incredibly well. So we'll have to see in the end what exactly his numbers are from a threshold perspective. What's his weight? What's his arm length? All those things are going to matter, but certainly he was super impressive. Can I give you a hot take here? Here's a hot take.
Yeah.
Ready?
Yeah.
We had a conversation a few weeks ago about after Jermod McCoy in the 2026 class, the cornerback out of Tennessee, who the heck is cornerback 2? And my answer was like, as of now, Will Lee from Texas A&M is my cornerback 2, and like that's probably the guy that I would vote for here. I think there's a world where it's Mansour DeLeone. Like, and Mansour DeLeone was a top 5 guy for me. I think he was number 5, if I remember correctly, on our rankings. I like the former Virginia Tech transfer a ton. But, Joe, against good wide receivers, by the way. Like, I know that we talk about Antonio Williams getting banged up, but like they still have TJ Moore. They still have Bryant Westco. I would argue that Mansour DeLeone was the best player on the field on each side of the football in this game. I would make that argument. Number 4, outside corner, about 5'11", 195 pounds, solid length. But, man, he was sticky in coverage, bro. Like, whether he was playing zone, whether he was playing man, these wide receivers could not create separation against this kid. And he was physical, too, right? Like, he was more physical than we saw at Virginia Tech. I was incredibly impressed by Mansour DeLeone, who I think has a claim to potentially being a top 50 selection in the 2026 class.
The hype for DeLeone could not have started with a better first game. And his performance, he was flying all over the field. He was reactive. He was creating disruption in coverage. All of those things are enough to push a guy further up into the first round. So I love DeLeone as a prospect, and I loved what I saw from him. The Clemson side of things, as we said, not a lot of sexy names that we're going to really talk about here because Peter Woods was disruptive, but just didn't really flash as we're used to seeing him. Will Helt had a really nice game having the sack that he registered. The one talking point that you brought up to me that I think is worth discussing, TJ Parker did disappear. TJ Parker did not show up as much as we would have liked. Having one sack against a completely rebuilt offensive line is a concern. Parker needed to be the guy to get things rolling. He needed to be the guy to get the juice and the confidence of that group completely flowing, and he wasn't able to do it. He was a disappearing act, I felt like, for most of the game.
So quick backtrack to Aaron Anderson for a second because I forgot to respond to your blurb on him real quick. That kid is lightning in a bottle and easy slot on the NFL level. He's small, he's tiny, I get it, but that kid's pretty strong through contact and he's explosive. But yes, going forward to TJ Parker now, not to be too convoluted here. TJ Parker has every tool that you would want. He's 6'3", he's 265 pounds, he's strong, he's explosive. Not great bend, but okay bend for his build. Like, there's a lot of building blocks there. And if you popped on the Pitt game in 2024, you would say that is a top 10 selection potentially in the 2026 NFL draft. But then you pop on a variety of other games, you're like, I just wanted more. I want more for TJ Parker. And this was the same in this game, Joe. Like, it really was, man. You're going against two young offensive tackles in this football game who, I don't know if this is a hot take, and LSU fans might get mad about this, but I didn't think either was that good. Like, I didn't think either tackle was like, yeah, he's a stud. Like, maybe they'll end up being good players, but they looked like young tackles in this football game. And despite that, the only edge that made plays was Will Heltz in the run game, and then he had the only sack of the game as well against Garrett Nussmeier. So, I mean, we need to have the conversation, right? It's a one-game sample, so there's going to be 11-plus football games left for T.J. Parker to show that he can be edge one in the 2026 class against guys like Keldrick Falk and a few others. But I really do think that this absence in certain football games, especially to this magnitude, like, you needed TJ Parker to show up. And I thought he did an okay job in the run game as far as like holding the point of attack and setting a firm edge. Like, that's because that's one thing of like, you know, he had some moments in the run game, but you're drafting that kid to be an impactful pass rusher and to create negatives, and he didn't do that in this football game. So yes, I was very underwhelmed with TJ Parker. And I thought similarly of Peter Woods, but at least when I was watching Peter Woods, I'm like, at least he was a little disruptive. Like, he had some plays where he forced running backs to make early cuts in the backfield. He forced guys to bounce. Peter Woods was still active. He just didn't make a ton of plays. TJ Parker, I was just like, hey man, I felt like I had to put him on a milk carton, bro. Like, he was just too gone too often.
I will throw out one positive. Not a guy in the 2026 class, but dude, Sammy Brown flies. Sammy Brown flies all over the field. And I'm still so excited for what that kid could potentially be in future draft classes, because he is a silly athlete. And I started to see some plays where his vision was a lot better. I felt like his instincts, he's coming downhill, he's settling at the line of scrimmage, he's making plays at the line of scrimmage. He will be a first-round guy that we're talking about in the 2027 draft, because he's got the goods, he's got the explosiveness, and if it's coupled with an improved ability to read the field in front of him, that is going to make him incredibly more dangerous. Outside of Brown, was there anyone else that you wanted to touch on before we close out?
No, I think Sammy Brown's, again, sophomore, former 5-star out of the state of Georgia, Jefferson High School. He was a all-everything linebacker in high school. And, dude, he ran like 10.6 in the 100 meters or something like that. So he is going to test phenomenally well. I would say, outside of getting boxed out by Tradez Green in the end zone, I thought Avian Terrell from Clemson had a nice game. Like, I thought he had a nice game.
Yeah, there's nothing you could do there.
Yeah, I mean, the kid's 6'7", 240 pounds. Right. So, like, what am I going to do? 6'7" versus probably 5'10" is probably what Avian Terrell is. But Terrell, of course, the younger brother of A.J. Terrell. Different body type, a lot smaller. The one thing I loved about this game, I don't know if you noticed this, Terrell played sometimes in the slots in this football game as well. Like, he wasn't just an outside corner, and I love that because I do think potentially he's better on the inside than he is on the outside just because of his lack of size and lack of length. But he had the big forced fumble early in the football game in a run fit. He was pretty physical, and he was sticky in man coverage. It's just you need to find the best way to design matchups for him because, again, against Tradez Green, which is it's a big tight end, so it's not a great example. But when he has to go in the NFL against guys like T. Higgins or some of these bigger outside-oriented wide receivers, he'll probably struggle a little bit, which is why I do think that he is better suited in the slot on the NFL level, but I think he could be a very good slot potentially on the NFL as well.
All right, folks, that's going to be it from us. We're going to be back this upcoming week with another breakdown of the top college players that you need to know for the future NFL drafts. Hit that like button and subscribe. We'll talk to you later.